Thank you very much. I wanted to take a picture because they're not going to believe this back home in Philadelphia. Lisa's right. I feel like I belong here. I can see why clearly this is the best state in the Union. And I don't say that to all the states. You folks really are special, and we just need more of you in other parts of the country. So thank you very much for inviting me here and for allowing me a chance to talk to you for a few minutes. It's great to be here on this beautiful day on the fairgrounds here. For just a few minutes, I'd like you to suspend disbelief. Imagine that it's raining here. Imagine that every one of us is either uninsured or that we have insurance, but it has such high deductibles that we still can't afford to go to the doctor. Imagine that many of us slept in our cars last night, waiting to get in the fairground gates, camped out, just for a chance to see a doctor. Imagine that we've been waiting in long lines for hours in the rain for a chance to be treated by a doctor, volunteering his or her time to help us become well. And imagine that these long lines lead to barns and animal stalls that other volunteers have cleaned and disinfected just so the doctors would have a place to treat us. Folks, you don't really need to suspend disbelief because that scene I just described actually happens in this country. I know because I witnessed a scene like that at the fairgrounds near where I grew up in the southern Appalachian Mountains. It's near Kingsport, Tennessee, where I grew up. In Wise County, Virginia. It's a community with a lot of folks who are unemployed and have no insurance, but a lot of people who have insurance, but still can't afford to go to the doctor. That being there really changed my life, the course of my life, and I to this day don't know what took me there. It was just, I say I was curious to find out what it was like. I'd never heard of the organization putting it on. It was being put on by an organization called Remote Area Medical, which got its start back in the 80s, flying doctors to remote villages in the Amazon to provide free care to people there and to villages in Africa. And the founder of the organization, Stan Brock, who some of you, probably as old as me, remember he used to be in Animal Kingdom. He organized this because he had spent many times in these developing countries and knew that there's great need. But he also saw, after living here for a few years, the great need that we have in this country for the same kind of care. So since then he's been putting on these expeditions, as he calls them. They're called expeditions because he took doctors originally to these remote villages in developing countries. But he's now put on more than 575 of these in this country. And one of the most recent was in Los Angeles. It was his first big urban expedition, and thousands of people lined up there over 8 days to get care that was being provided by doctors volunteering their times. And he's going to be holding another one in Tennessee, not too far from where I grew up, the end of next week, actually next weekend. It's going to be actually in the home county of Nancy Ann DeParle, and Nancy Ann is the person who's heading up President Obama's healthcare reform office. And I told her about this, and I hope that she and the president might make it down there. I think it would be important for them and other lawmakers to see something like that goes on. Folks, I would like to apologize really to all of you for the role that I played 15 years ago in cheating you out of a reformed healthcare system. Had it not been for greedy insurance companies and other special interests and their army of lobbyists and spin doctors like I used to be, we wouldn't be here today, or we wouldn't be talking about this today, and people would not need to be lining up for hours in the rain to get medical care in animal stalls in this country. As a former journalist, I'm also ashamed that I let myself get caught up in deceitful and dishonest PR campaigns that worked so well that hundreds of thousands of our citizens have died and millions of others have lost their homes and been forced into bankruptcy, so that a very few corporate executives and their Wall Street masters could become exceedingly rich. But it was only during the last few years of my career that I came to realize the full scope of the harm that my colleagues and I had caused, and the lengths that insurance companies will go to increase their profits at the expense of working families. As I told the Senate Commerce Committee earlier this summer, the higher up the corporate ladder I climbed, the more I could see how insurance companies confuse their customers and dump the sick, all so they can satisfy those Wall Street investors, their masters. I described for the senators how insurance companies make promises they have no intention of keeping, how they flout regulations designed to protect consumers, and how they make it nearly impossible to understand or even to obtain the information that we all need. I also told the senators how the industry has conducted duplicitous and well-financed PR and lobbying campaigns every time Congress has tried to reform our healthcare system, and how its current behind-the-scenes efforts may well shape reform in a way that benefits them and Wall Street far more than average Americans. In fact, I've watched the stock price of the for-profit health insurance companies that I used to work for and their competitors. Over the last 3 months, the last company I worked for, Cigna, its stock price has increased 50% because the investors on Wall Street don't think that Congress is going to pass any legislation that's going to hurt them anyway. I noted in my testimony that just as the industry did 15 years ago when it led the effort to kill the Clinton reform plan, it is using shills and front groups to spread lies and disinformation to scare Americans away from the very reform that would benefit them most. Make no mistake, the industry, despite its public assurances to be good faith partners with the President and with Congress, it has been at work for years laying the groundwork for deceptive and often sinister campaigns to manipulate public opinion. The industry goes to great lengths to keep its involvement in these campaigns hidden from public view. But I know from my own involvement in these campaigns that industry leaders are always full partners in developing strategies to derail reform that might interfere with their ability to increase their company's profits. You can rest assured that the industry is up to the same dirty tricks, using the same devious PR tactics it has used for decades to kill reform this year, or even better, to shape reforms so that it benefits insurance companies and their Wall Street investors far more than you. We all need to be alert to how the industry and its allies are working to influence our opinions and lawmakers' votes. We must realize that when we hear isolated stories of long waiting times to see doctors in Canada and allegations that care in other systems is rationed by government bureaucrats, the insurance company has written the script. And we must realize that every time we hear that we will be heading down the slippery slope towards socialism if Congress gives the government a greater role in our healthcare system, that some insurance flack like I used to be wrote that also. Every time you hear about the shortcomings of what they call government-run healthcare, remember this: what we have now in this country and what the insurance companies are determined to keep in place is Wall Street-run healthcare. And remember, and know this, that we already have one of the most insidious means of rationing care in the world. Not by people we can hold accountable on election day, but by insurance company executives like I used to be, who answer only to a few wealthy investors, who care far more about earnings per share and their medical loss ratios than your health and well-being. If Congress goes along with the so-called solutions the insurance industry says it's bringing to the table this time, and fails to pass real reform, the bill it sends to Congress, or sends to President Obama, might as well be called the Insurance Industry Profit Protection and Enhancement Act. The industry certainly talks a good game, trying to make us believe it is for a more equitable healthcare system this time. But it has talked this talk before, many times in the past, as a matter of fact. And as I said earlier, it is making commitments it has no intention of keeping. Here's just one example. In late 1993, the year I joined Cigna, the president of the company's healthcare division was one of 3 health insurance executives who testified before a House committee about how much they shared the Clinton administration's goals for reform. Those goals included covering all Americans, eliminating the use of pre-existing conditions to exclude people from coverage, making sure people could take their insurance from job to job, and creating a standard benefit plan. Have you heard that before? That's because we're hearing the industry executives saying the same things and making the same assurances this time around. This time, though, the industry is bigger, it's richer, and it's stronger, and it has a much tighter grip on our healthcare system than it ever has before. In fact, in the 15 years since the insurance companies killed the Clinton plan, the industry has consolidated to the point that it is now dominated by a cartel of large for-profit insurers, 2 of which I used to work for. Another thing the industry said earlier this year was that it was willing to make concessions, that it was in fact eager to accept more regulation and oversight from the government. Well, we're finding out that that too was just a part of the industry's charm offensive. Just last week, America's Health Insurance Plans, which is the biggest trade group for insurance companies, came out with a big elaborate chart, which is circulating on Capitol Hill, in an attempt to persuade us that the industry already is over-regulated. Thank you very much. Folks, it's not too late to keep the insurance companies from winning, but time really is running short. We need to think of the coming weeks as some of the most important weeks in the history of this country. If we want to take back control of our healthcare system from the big for-profit companies that have wrecked it, we really must begin to act now in ways that we haven't before. It wasn't enough for us to elect President Obama. It wasn't enough for us to elect enough Democrats to control both houses of Congress. We need to make sure they know that we expect something from them this time. We must begin to talk in ways that reach our friends and neighbors who have been influenced by the lies. We need to tell them that we can continue to have a system that allows 20,000 Americans to die every year because they don't have insurance. Or we can have a system that will make sure that their son or their daughter is not one of them. We must remind our family members and our friends and neighbors why we're having this debate in the first place, as the President tried to do in his speech on Wednesday night to the joint session of Congress. If they tell you they don't think their tax dollars should be used to pay for someone else's coverage, point out to them that they already are paying for the care uninsured people receive when they go to the emergency room and can't afford to pay the exorbitant bills they get from the hospital. If they say they don't want to saddle their children and grandchildren with additional taxes, ask them if they thought what might happen to their children and grandchildren if they found themselves among the millions of people without health insurance, or maybe more likely in the coming years, among the underinsured. Ask them how they would feel if their son, if their daughter came down with breast cancer soon after she and your son-in-law had moved into their dream house, and just as your grandchildren were beginning to think about college. Ask them how they would feel if their daughter and son-in-law learned that the insurance they thought would be there for them when they needed it required them to pay so much out of their own pockets that they couldn't afford to pay for their daughter's cancer treatments and also make the house payments. Ask them how they would feel if their children and grandchildren were forced out of that dream home and into bankruptcy. And ask them how they would feel if their grandchildren had to give up their dreams of going to college. Ask them how they would feel when they found out that all this happened because their daughter's private insurance company forced her to pay more for her care than her family could afford, just so it could continue to pay its CEO $30 million a year and to meet Wall Street's profit expectations. And ask them if they are 100% sure that they will not be joining the ranks of the uninsured or the underinsured pretty soon. You know, I recognize that many people do have legitimate concerns about healthcare reform, but I don't know a single American, or at least I hope I don't, who would knowingly wish the future I just described on anyone's family. But the sad reality is that many of the most vocal opponents of reform have become unwitting spokespeople for the insurance industry. Many of the people who are disrupting town hall meetings, like we saw happening during the month of August, have bought into the lies the insurance industry's shills are telling them. But folks, that horrific scenario I just described already is a reality for millions of Americans. And it will be a reality for many more of us in the coming future if Congress doesn't do the right thing. I was at a town hall not long ago, just a few days ago in New Jersey, and was giving similar remarks, and a woman came up afterwards and was very indignant, and she said she's wearing carrying a sign that said "Tort Reform Now," so I knew she wasn't going to give me any encouraging words. She said, "No one paid me to be here," and I thought, I didn't say this to her, but I thought, I know that. They didn't have to pay you. The money went to the big PR firms to develop the campaigns that got you to come out here today. So folks, over the coming weeks, we must tell our friends who are worried needlessly about a government takeover of our healthcare system that what we all should really be concerned about is the Wall Street takeover that has occurred while we were not paying attention. It is that takeover that has led to more and more working Americans being forced into the ranks of the underinsured or the uninsured. It is that takeover that has forced millions more of us into the ranks of the underinsured because insurers are making us pay thousands of dollars out of our own pockets before they'll pay a dime. It is that takeover that has forced many of our neighbors out of their homes and into bankruptcy, and it is that takeover that is causing more and more small businesses to stop offering coverage to their employees because of the exorbitant premiums that greedy Wall Street-driven insurance companies are charging them. As I noted earlier, the coming weeks will be some of the most important weeks of our lives. If the insurance companies get their way, reform will benefit them far more than it benefits working families in this country. So we must make sure that members of Congress know that we expect them to vote the right way this time, because it's imperative that America at last join the rest of the developed world in making sure that all of its citizens, our brothers and sisters, our sons and our daughters, our neighbors and our co-workers, will finally have good health insurance that we can all count on being there when we need it. Just one more final comment. I'm often asked by people, what can they do specifically to help out and to make sure that we get the reform we need? A lot of people are just discouraged and thinking that, well, the industry is going to win again, so what should I do, and why should I do anything? Here's what I say. You need to tell the people who work for you, who you hired with your votes, to do the right thing. If you agree with me that single payer, for example, is the ultimate solution, don't keep it to yourself. Tell your congressman or your congresswoman and your senators. If you are as outraged as I am that Congress and the President might force us to buy overpriced insurance from Wall Street-driven insurance companies and not give us at least the option of enrolling in a public government-run plan, tell your congressman or congresswoman and your senator. I really ask you to call them, to write them, to send them an email, to sit down and write with pen and paper a note to send to them. Tell them how you feel through letters to the editor of your local newspaper. When you call them, call their district offices. Don't call their Washington offices. Call their district offices, and they'll get your message better that way. And if you only have time to make maybe just one or two calls, I suggest that you call Congressman Ron Kine in Wisconsin here, and call his office in La Crosse, and tell him what you think he should be doing with reform. And his number, by the way, is 608-782-2558. And if you got time to make one more phone call, call Senator Herb Kohl's office. I think they'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much.